Good morning or afternoon or evening whenever you may be seeing this. My name is Martha Sue Hall, and over the years I have worn many hats. But today I believe the hat that I am wearing is a hat that I actually wore 35 years ago, and that blows my mind. With me today are Sharon Hazlett and Cindy Meisenheimer. And they are going to be talking with you about what they do as volunteers as a member of the Guardian Ad Litem program. But before we get into that, I need to say publicly, and they don't even know I'm going to do this, that the two of them and their respective spouses, if they were sitting here, I can blame most of what I have done in the hats that I have worn for 35 years on not necessarily these two women, but to their two spouses. So before I go any further, I need to publicly thank Sharon and Dan, if Dan were here, and Cindy, and Mr. Meisenheimer. He will always be Mr. Meisenheimer to me. It won't be Gene. They, in their respective earlier careers, had so much to do with helping me as a young lady or even as a child in school. So I appreciate that so much, and I can't ever be in a room with the two of you or your spouses without publicly thanking the two of them and now the two of you. So, with that out of the way, I will go ahead and talk about the Guardian Ad Litem program. The Guardian Ad Litem is Latin for guardian for this case or guardian for this litigation. Okay? Best interest of the child. In 1985, the program, or 1983, the Guardian Ad Litem program was started in North Carolina. And in 1983, of course, just like today, they start big programs in larger cities. And in 1983, there was one in Charlotte, there was one in Wilmington, there was one in Durham, there was one in Raleigh. There might have been one in Asheville in 1983, and they were doing great. They had lots of volunteers and doing a lot of good work. 1986 came along, and Bobby Huffman was our chief district court judge. Now you have to remember, in 1986, our district was the 20th district, no letters attached like there are today, ABC or whatever. It was the 20th district, and it was composed of 5 counties. Now think strategically where we are in Stanley County. The 20th district went south to Anson and then over to Richmond. It went to Union, and then it skipped Montgomery and went to Moore. So it was Anson, Richmond, Moore, Stanley, and Union counties. That was a huge judicial district. We had judges who would live in the most southern end or southwestern end of Union County that would end up in court in Moore County, and that was a 2-hour drive for those folks. So that was a long time ago. That was 35 years ago. But 35 years ago, it was the 20th district made up of those 5 counties. It was our time to have a Guardian Ad Litem program. It wasn't just our time. There was no other multi-county, particularly rural counties, program in the state. And heaven only knows why the 20th district was zeroed in on. Except that maybe even 35 years ago, Union County was a little Mecklenburg to a certain extent, not as great as it is today, but because of the population boom and that kind of thing. But still, we were, by definition, 5 counties, very, very rural. So we were selected to be or to host the next or the first multi-county program, but the next program. So at that time, Judge Huffman, who was from Anson County, our chief district court judge, I was working for the court, for the judge's office, with the community service program then. Judge Huffman pulled me aside one day and said, "You're going to change jobs." And I said, "I am?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am, you're going to change jobs." And I looked at him and I said, I was wondering, am I being fired or what's going on? And he said, "No, but Franklin Freeman, who is the AOC director, wants to meet with you." And I knew that name, and he was one of those big people that had an office in Raleigh, justice office, and was like, "I don't know that I need to do that." And he said, "It's actually, you have an interview with him tomorrow morning." And my eyes got big, and I thought, what is it that I am doing? So I asked him, and he said, no, we have been selected to do this Guardian program, whatever that is, whatever this GAL program is, and I want you to run this program. And so the next morning I ended up in Raleigh and interviewed for this program, had no real knowledge of what it was. But the reason that Judge Huffman wanted me to do it was because I had knowledge of the 5 counties, because I'd been working within those 5 counties with the community service program. So going from not knowing anything to changing jobs the next day and starting within 2 weeks, the bottom or the base for this all was I didn't want to change jobs because I was pregnant with my first child, and nobody knew that. So I knew in my mind whatever I did for the next 6 months had to be done and done right. And in 6 months I was able to recruit, screen, train 40 volunteers across those 5 counties. And what an absolute whirlwind it was. But some of those volunteers, and now I'll look at the 2 of you and think, golly, these are volunteers. Where were y'all 35 years ago? I know where you were 35 years ago. You were working. Some of those volunteers have long gone, and some of them are still alive and still making a difference in the lives of a lot of people. So I say all that just to give the background on why did we have one. And after, it must have been within the next 5 years, after 1986 and 7, within the next 5 years they started popping up in a lot of rural counties. So that basically is the history. The one thing that I did not tell you about the history that's different today than it was then is that there were volunteers then, and there was an attorney then. But unlike the attorney today, the attorney at that point, 35 years ago, was a volunteer himself, okay? No money, no pay. It was all pro bono. He did every bit of the advocate work, attorney, advocate work, with no pay. And I will give a shout out today to the person in Stanley County, that was Jim Phillips, 35 years ago, who went into court on his own and worked hand in hand with the volunteers just like they do today to make the best interest of those children, or narrow it down to that child, make that best interest known to the court. So thanks to Jim Phillips for the years that he did that completely pro bono. A young attorney he was then, but what a wonderful program for him to be a part of. So, you know, what was going on then is still going on today. We still have volunteers, we still have an attorney advocate. The chain of command might be a little bit different. I know locally you all work with Jody and with John Michael. And it's funny, as I said to you all earlier, I look at John Michael and think you're supposed to still be in that job you were in 25 years ago. But he is no longer there. So, I've talked about what the history and who I am and all that kind of stuff. What I really want to know, and for the folks that are watching it, why in the world in retirement will y'all be doing this? So give me, I'll start with Sharon, where you worked and what you did, anything else you want to share about who Sharon Hazlett is.
Well, Sharon Hazlett was an elementary guidance counselor, and I retired as a guidance counselor. I taught reading before that. My dad lived with me a year. I watched my grandchildren for several years, and then all of a sudden I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was at a retired teachers meeting, and it just so happened that Cindy Meisenheimer was doing a presentation about guardian ad litem. And sitting there wasn't a doubt in my mind. I went home and I called Carolyn. And I told her that I had heard Cindy and that I wanted to pursue being a guardian ad litem. I'm not a shopper. I like to travel, but with a purpose. And I'm not a shopper. I need something specific to do. And guardian ad litem has filled that role.
So Cindy, so it sounds like to me you were there before she came along.
Right.
So hold on a minute. So how long ago, when did you begin?
I just finished my 6th year.
Oh, where have I been? So Cindy, what did you do and where and How long have you been a volunteer?
I've been a volunteer for 7 years, so
Okay.
just about a year later, longer than Sharon has. I was a music teacher, and so I taught K through 12 because I taught in elementary schools, and then I also taught high school chorus. So I had a lot of children during that time. Taught for about 20 years, and then decided I was going to be an administrator. So I became an assistant principal, and then became a principal. Left Stanley County, went to Rowan County, was a principal up there in 2 schools, and then retired from there about a little over 7 years ago. And so I had worked with some really wonderful guardian ad litems during my time as a principal. And so I thought, when I retire, I think I would like to do that. So after several months of being retired, I called Carolyn. And of course, Carolyn said, oh, yes, let's get you in training. So, I haven't looked back since then. It's been a wonderful fit for me as a volunteer because I can be just as busy as I want to and still be able to do other things. But it has been a great fit.
It's funny that both of you speak of Carolyn, and that same Carolyn, like I said earlier to you all, I hired in Union County, must have been 20 years ago, okay? She came to the judge's office from as a child support agent, and it's funny how we've all worked, and it's all been around children and families. So other than hearing her talk about her experience, what else intrigued you to really make you want to do this?
Well, Cindy just reminded me that I too had seen, and just on the surface, like hello, introductions, a couple of guardian ad litem volunteers who came to North Albemarle.
Yeah.
And so I knew, and I'm like, I like what they're doing. Because I asked what their job was, and I just knew about it. I admired them when they came to the school, and that seed was planted.
That's so good that the seed was planted, and then she just probably cultivated it a bit. Is that right? So, you basically, what intrigued you?
Well, I think having spent 34 years in education with children every single day, no matter what age, I just couldn't imagine all of a sudden walking away and not having anything to do with children after that many years of basically being an advocate for children anyway, because that's part of what you do as a teacher and as a principal, that I just couldn't imagine not being a voice for children or having any kind of impact with children. So.
And back both as a counselor or reading teacher or music teacher and or principal, you all could do your voices to a certain extent. But boy, oh my goodness, at the voice that you can be now. Because whether or not these children who are dependent, neglected, or abused, and I so wish that I could say 35 years ago when we had I have no idea, probably 30 children in Stanley County in custody or in some kind of placement, not in custody. Well, it was outside of their home. I wish that the need for volunteers with the Guardian Ad Litem program would be dismissed by now. But probably, and God, what a horrible thing to think, we still have children today in 2021 who need that voice, who need their best interest screamed to the court. Now, it may be that what you all decide is the best interest is what DSS says, or what other folks are saying, or what parent attorneys are saying, but in fact, it might not be. It might not be. And I'd say that, and it's not dissing anyone or dissing any program out there. But in 35 years, I am sure, because it's only been 7 or so since I retired, and not working with the Guardian program, but still with the court and with what the code, the juvenile code says they must do, and the protocol and the operating procedures, what they must offer before they remove a child. I mean, I know, and I can just imagine how heart-wrenching it is for the two of you and the other volunteers. And the need is just that much stronger to be able to say, the operating procedure may say this, but this actually is in best interest of this child. And I see you all both just agreeing because that's where my heart was then, and I'm sure it's just even tighter now. Oh my goodness. So you've been here 6 years, you've been here 7 years. About how many cases have you had? And I know it's cases, it used to be cases/children because some were ones and some were twos. About how many cases and or children have you been a volunteer for?
I can tell you that I have worked with, or I am working with, 20 families. And I have worked with, or am working, well, I have worked with, including those I have now, 38 children.
Oh, in 6 years.
And Cindy and I both have the same. Very early on, we told Carolyn and then told Jody, our now district person, and John Michael knows too, we like to be busy. So we take multiple cases and are very, that's very satisfying.
20. And how about you, Cindy?
Well, I did the math last night. I've had, which includes the present cases that I have, 60 children. And that's between Stanley and Union County, because Sharon and I shared a case in Union County of 9 children. So, yeah. So, right now I have 5 families and 10 children currently. And I think that's the max we're allowed to have.
So I didn't ask you this, or I didn't send this to you. I just thought about it, okay? I hate to ask this question because this will break my heart. It will break my heart. Currently, what is the average time that you all have a case? And I should have given you a little, while y'all were thinking, let me tell you that over the years, I mean, when I came into the program in 85, 86, I mean, average time in foster care was 28 to 35 months. And that was in foster care. That was not necessarily just in family care or kinship care. What is it? Is it less than that now? Before you get from the time you open it to the time you're able to say case closed?
My longest case was 3 years. And it did end up with a termination of parental rights. And the child was adopted. And the shortest would have been probably 4 to 5 months.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But the typical time now is, I would say, over a year, 18 months, 2 years.
Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. I have a case right now that I've had over 3 years. Typically, they run about a year and a half. Now, if the parental rights have to be terminated, you can pretty well guarantee an extra year being added onto that case. And, that's where we are with some of my cases right now. We just are waiting for those rights to be terminated and for that adoption to begin and that adoption paperwork to begin. But I would say probably about a year and a half is the average time.
You all both have spoken about adoption, and again, and this is not something I threw to you all, but just something I thought about. It used to be that parental rights would just be terminated, bam, 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 bam. And a lot of children that were in foster care, again, 30 plus years ago, were there. Rights had been terminated, and they were just hanging in the wind, okay? And some folks say, well, they're not adoptable because they're a certain age, okay? Are we, when a case is terminated now, are children pretty much, when they're free, and I hate to use that word, free for adoption. You all are out of it at that point, but are there adoptive families ready? Are there folks ready in the wings to take those children?
I have not had a child whose parents' rights have been terminated. We didn't already have an adoption
ready.
Oh.
Because I just remember terminating parental rights is actually cutting. I just remember a judge, it might have been Ron Burris, saying, you realize if you cut these rights, you terminate them, you are cutting it off. Right there.
Rule.
So Cindy, this can be heart-wrenching, I am certain. Well, I know it can be. You have to use your heart and your head. what has been the most challenging part, and then what's the most worthwhile part of being a volunteer for the Guardian Ad Litem program?
I think one of the most challenging parts is seeing the needs that children have and not always having the things that children need in place, like really intense therapy for children because of some type of abuse or trauma, and that they need those to help the quality of their lives, and they're just maybe don't exist at this point. The other thing is, I think people tend to forget a year in a child's life is very different from a year in an adult's life. And sometimes we have to remind people of that. That while we're playing games with who's going to win and continuances and that kind of stuff, we're talking about a child's life hanging in the balance at that point and things that are going on with them. That's very frustrating. The other part is we always have to remember that we can be questioned about anything that's in our reports, as you are very well aware. And so, you do have to get up on the witness stand and you are questioned about what you put in your report. So you just have to be prepared for that. What is the most rewarding is that you can't be fearful and you have to be courageous. Sometimes you have to go out on a limb, and that's very rewarding when you see what you truly believe is in the best interest of a child, and the court actually agrees with you and said, yes, I think you're right, and that's what needs to happen. And then you see these children who have, been returned back home and things are wonderful, or they've been adopted and things are wonderful, and you see them and you see that the quality of their life is so good, and that all the things that you'd hope for them are actually coming true.
Messing with my heart there, Cindy, messing with my heart. So what about you, Sharon?
When I think about this question, I am reminded that as a guardian ad litem, our goal is permanence for a child. Children need that security, they crave it, and that is our focus, that permanency will be achieved. My difficulty is in being patient. I can understand that we have to be careful that the rights of all of the individuals are respected, and that there are times that Cindy mentioned continuances. But I do find myself impatient when it involves the child directly and the services they need. It's very, it's time consuming to get therapies in place, specific needs identified and taken care of, not because that isn't the goal and that there aren't people working on it. It just takes a lot of time. So I find myself just sometimes being so impatient, and I just want to say, get it done. Just do it. So.
And I understand that. Both of you have spoken about time in the life of a child. I remember, I can see it in my head. There used to be in the training manual a sheet that had a calendar on it, and it had different faces or different, I guess they would call them icons today, of smiley faces and frowns and that kind of thing. And how when we would do the guardian training, that one particular piece of paper just comes out, and it's a calendar with 12 months. And it starts with a smile, and it gets to be just completely brokenhearted at the end. Because to us that have worked and have raised our children and are now retired, and it seems like yesterday was January 1st, or yesterday was the beginning of COVID. And when we think about it, that's 18 months. And you think about for an infant, those 18 months. I remember that sheet of paper, as you both have spoken about, time and of patience, and the report, be objectivity versus subjectivity. I can remember that used to be something we had to really be stringent upon, or really, really talk about. Thank you for talking about everyone's feelings. I mean, by the grace, it probably was none of, it could have been any of us, I mean, to a certain extent. The most rewarding, and I know you can't give names of cases, okay, but maybe the the hardest thing out there, or the most horrible case, or the most rewarding that you have experienced, whether it was a decision or a final, a closing of a case. Either one of you want to talk about the most rewarding? Because I don't want to talk about sad stuff. I want to talk about most rewarding.
I've had several cases where children were adopted, and it's just to see them with their adoptive parents now, just how they don't even, they consider that to be their child. It is very rewarding to see that, and how those children have blossomed and grown, and how their needs are taken care of, and that really is wonderful.
Sharon?
I would have to agree. One child I worked with for 3 years, and it did end up with adoption. And just the from the heart smiles of the child, of the family adopting, the inclusiveness of extended family. I had another case, and it was an adoption. The only two I've dealt with, there were medical issues involved, and the child ended up being adopted by a family acquaintance, and the smiles and the pure joy, it seems like these days we don't get to see a lot of joy, and when you see joy on the face of a child and the adult or adults, it's just a very heartwarming, satisfying moment.
Guardian for this case, guardian for this litigation, guardian for this child, best interest, permanence. And when we think about it, we shouldn't have to have this, okay? Children did not ask to be born, okay? We should not have to have these kinds of programs out there. But just hearing you all, oh my goodness. Are there any closing comments to the jury that you would like to make, even though this is not a jury time? Is there?
I guess one of the things I would say, because we have learned so much through all of this, we talk about that all the time, not only law and legal things, but also lessons of the heart. But I think my appreciation for foster parents, oh my goodness, they are just the heroes in all of this. I'm just absolutely amazed at what they are willing to do. In the middle of the night, take a child and sit up all night with them if they need to. How they are always advocating for those children. And just, like I say, I had never really worked with foster parents that much, even in the school system. But my goodness. And what the social workers, what they are willing to do, and the extra things they do to try to help children and help families, and I'm just amazed at them also. People just don't know what all that they do.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned both of those groups, but the foster parents particularly. Sharon?
And in thinking about this, I had a similar reaction. I have become acquainted with and friends with folks I would have never met. Cindy, I knew Cindy as a teacher, but never as one to share. I'll call Cindy and ask her questions. She might call me and ask a question. And others who volunteer as a guardian ad litem. I have much appreciation for the foster care workers, for our DSS, all of the DSS workers we work with, but those who especially work with the foster care. And then I have another group too, and kind of the unsung heroes. As a grandparent of 3 wonderful grandchildren, I am so impressed with what grandparents do. I looked at some numbers, and I shared with you that I had worked with 20 families. There 15 of those cases have been settled. There are 14 of the kids that I've worked with are in placements with 8 grandparents. So 8 sets of grandparents or a single grandparent stepped up at their older age, willing to take on that responsibility. is, as I say, as a grandparent, that's really impressive.
Right.
And I think kudos to the grandparents too, but to the foster care workers, the amazing things they do, and to those who work from the DSS end. Too.
Grandparents, foster parents, DSS workers were all called. All so called. One of the things that I remember when I was the guardian ad litem administrator was that I would tell my volunteers, thank you a lot. And I would do it as I'm doing it to the two of you, because then and now, I don't want that child, then or now, to realize the depth of time and talent and energy and enthusiasm and determination and dedication that volunteers use on and for those children's behalf. Okay? I really tried to keep my volunteers pumped up and thanked, because it is the time that you all give that makes their life better for the moment and for years to come. So thank you all very much. I have in my notes, when I went to the DA's office in 1995, starting another program, I always, from then until now, have always kept up with what was going on with the Guardian Ad Litem program. And it just absolutely makes my heart sing to think that a program that was brand new in a rural Stanley County and surrounding counties. We were the first multi-county district to do this. Still has a very vibrant and very organized and meaningful set of volunteers. In my closing over the years, in this county, because this is where you live, I have seen now adults come up to me and say, thank you. And I'll look at them and say, thank me for what? Thank you for helping me get with my grandparents permanently, or for helping me get adopted. And I'm thinking about certain children right now who I know as adults, who I remember when they were placed in their foster parent, now adoptive parent home, and you probably know exactly who I'm talking about, Cindy, who those children know that I had a part in all of that. But some of those children that are not now adults in this county are ministers. Okay, and I know I can see him now whenever he told me thank you, and when I remember for what, and when he said these were my grandparents and this was what was going on with me as I am told, and I said, whoa, wait a minute, it wasn't me. It might have been the Guardian Ad Litem program, but it sure wasn't me. It was my volunteers then, as it is now. Okay, this program does not exist without folks who have a heart to do for others. So thank you so much. But just as it was 30 plus years ago and today, child abuse knows no boundaries. Child neglect and dependency knows no boundary. And no child should go to be abused. And then I want you all to stop and just really think and take my gratitude that I'm trying to express to you, that when these children who will be adult survivors, when they become adults, their life will be vibrant and more meaningful because of the two of you and all its other array of volunteers that are out there. It's okay to be able to say, I am an adult survivor of child abuse, particularly if you know that you've had somebody out there who represented your best interest. For those of you who are watching and who have seen this today, I first of all want to tell you how to find John Michael. You keep us here, let's talk about John Michael. John Michael is the local coordinator, let me think what he's called, program administrator or supervisor here. And John Michael's phone number is John Michael Heyman, 704-993-7010. And he told me to use that number. I can't believe that's a cell number, I don't know. But he also said, for more information, go to volunteer4gal.org. And again, That is volunteer4GAL, all one word, .org. Think about it. If what you've heard from these two ladies has intrigued you, go on there and look and find out more information. I'd like to thank the Historical Society for doing this, and Paul here at the History Center for videotaping us today, and for each of you who have taken the time to watch and to listen and to learn about the Guardian Ad Litem program here in Stanley County. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks to each of you.
Thank you.